Even as fat, stupid Americans, we still need to pay our respects to Queen Elizabeth II.
And what better way to do that than discuss what is probably the most successful Anglo-American partnership ever? The mid-2000s Jaguar X-Type.
Let us go back to a magical time, the late 90s and early 2000s, when absolutely no mistakes were made. During that run of complete flawlessness, there were a couple of perfect partnerships between American car makers and luxury European brands, the merger of equals Daimler-Chrysler,
which of course turned out to be an utter disaster.
Well, in hindsight, it's relatively easy to come to this conclusion.
And the Premier Automotive Group, which was a partnership between Ford and Jaguar.
One of the products from the Premier Automotive Group was the Jaguar X-Type, which recalled the Le Mans history of both the Jaguar D-Type and the Ford GT40 by combining a base model Jag V6 with the chassis from a Ford Mondeo.
Shockingly, given the car's Le Mans and Y2K pedigree, the car was a sales flop, which meant that relatively few people were exposed to what was a kinda terrible car.
You people are seasoned Lemons fans by now, and you know that an outdated luxury car does not require any explanation as to why it's a $500 machine. But, for the record, here's the story on this particular X-Type. You see, it stopped running. What? And the towing company that towed it to the shop, not knowing that it was all-wheel drive, towed it with the front wheels on the ground and the rears in the air. Okay!
Yeah, this is supposed to be one of those, what if you microwave metal moments. We all know you're not supposed to do that, but what actually happens? In this case, the transfer case, while attempting to transfer the spinning of the front wheels to the rears that were locked in the air, overheated, exploded, and blew completely off the back of the transmission.
Amazing! Then, the car's owner checked in with the shop to get an ETA on what, it surely had to be just a minor fix, right? Discovered that the car had exploded, and the towing company was in litigation with the shop trying to determine who is financially responsible.
This dragged on for months, and eventually the owner moved on to a newer, more reliable model that was almost certainly another Jaguar.
So now this exploded X-Type sitting there at the shop abandoned, and in walks the captain of the Lemons team, flaming a-holes, Rich. Now Rich has raced a Sunbeam Imp in Lemons, so he knows a thing or two about the finest British performance cars.
Somewhere in the mess of the shop versus towing company versus non-running and exploded bad Jaguar situation, Rich offered $1, which was immediately accepted.
So Rich dragged this thing home and pretty quickly diagnosed the original problem, which was a failure of the drive-by-wire system in the ECU. Went to the junkyard, found a replacement ECU, found a replacement transfer case for $80, and a 5-speed manual, which incredibly was an option for this car, for only $300. So he's into this thing well under $500, and he's got a perfectly running and surprisingly nice car.
Yeah, it even passed California's smog, so he said, you know what, he's gonna use this as a normal car. Which he did for about a year, and then decided that while it was surprisingly nice, his expectations started so low that surprisingly nice still meant sort of terrible.
So he just kind of parked it and it became re-abandoned, but then a British guy during COVID popped onto the Lemons forum. His day job of promoting British tourism in the US had pretty much died during the pandemic, and he was bored. I mean, really bored. So obviously his thought was, I know, Lemons.
Rich saw this and figured I may as well team up with this guy, and I have an all-wheel drive, 6-cylinder performance machine that is basically a Nissan GTR or an Audi RS6.
Well, okay.
He stripped it down, installed a roll cage, and had his new British teammate handle the theme, which of course has George Washington on one side and Queen Elizabeth on the other.
Now, somehow, a performance car like this, despite clearly it's got to be capable of winning the race overall, it was placed into Class C, our lowest class, by the judges. And in its first race, it lost narrowly in class to a stock first-generation Honda Insight, which, to be fair, is pretty powerful. In a later race, the engine exploded, which sent Rich on a mad dash to the pick and pull an hour before they closed, but he was able to pull the whole engine in about 2 minutes before they shut the gates. But then he got to the checkout and they wanted to charge him for every accessory that was still attached. So the alternator, each individual coil pack and spark plug wire, the exhaust manifolds, everything. Rich said, "That's fine, I'll strip it all down just to the bare block, that's all I want." They said, "We're closed, dude, we're not waiting for you."
Rich didn't make it back to the race at all, and for all of that trouble, they would have won and I got screwed, but the team was, still locked inside the pick and pull during the award ceremony, and you gotta be present to win.
This story does have a happy ending because finally at Sonoma, the car fulfilled its promise of all of that D-Type GT40 Le Mans DNA, and it barely won Class C over the Ford Ranger-based Cybertruck.